when parties talk about issues, they often talk about them in a negative way. And what you need to do as a mediator when you're identifying the key issues from both perspectives is put them on the board or on the page on Zoom in a neutral way. So it's no longer said in a negative. So if someone says, I feel disrespected, I would write up respect. Being mindful about how you start, but also your tone, body language, all those sort of things play a part in whether that conversation is going to go well or not.
Good day, and welcome to the Manage Self, Lead Others podcast. If you're an experienced or an emerging people manager, this is the podcast for you, and I'm your host, Nina Sunday. It's the show to help you explore ways to become the best version of yourself at work as a manager. We discuss self-leadership and leading people, and I talk to some of the best business minds on the planet. So sit back and listen and enjoy Manage Self, Lead Others. My guest today is Scott Dutton, the conflict whisperer and global expert on difficult conversations, conflict intelligence, mediation, emotional intelligence, and workplace culture. As a professional speaker, he's known as the fun maker and has spoken to over 25,000 professionals as a speaker and facilitator. My first question to Scott will be, exactly what does your term conflict intelligence describe? Please welcome Scott Dutton.
Thank you very much. That was a lovely intro.
Oh, thank you. My pleasure. We deserve it. And you've got a term that you've used, which is conflict intelligence. So can you tell us more about what that term conflict intelligence refers to, please, Scott?
Yeah, sure. So it's a concept we've come up with that's very interesting because my background is as a mediator. So I actually started as a parent and adolescent mediator and spent 9 years trying to assist young people to reconnect with family and prevent youth homelessness. And then we moved up to Byron from Melbourne about 17 years ago and started focusing on more workplace disputes. So I've had a lot of sort of experience in different settings, as well as doing a social work degree and a science degree. And so we've sort of brought a lot of those concepts together, as well as actually mindfulness. So I've been going to an ashram in southern India for 20 plus years, practicing meditation and mindfulness. And so we sort of brought all those concepts together to create conflict intelligence. So it's a really interesting concept. It's really about being smart with conflict, to put it simply.
Lovely.
Yes.
And sounds like you've been doing incredibly important work because reconciling estranged youth from their family is such a worthy goal. But of course, now you work in the workplace transforming team culture, which is the whole point of this podcast, because in a previous podcast, I mentioned that I was asked to describe my favorite boss. And I wrote down a list of the 12 I could remember, and I went, none of them are my favourite. I mean, some of them were abjectly terrible, and some had some redeeming features that I learned from, but no one was anyone I would role model.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
That's interesting. It makes me think, because I've probably worked with about 500 different organisations over the years, mainly running training and doing some keynotes, etc., but mainly around conflict, difficult conversations, and, as you say, team culture. So I've come across a lot of leaders leading their teams trying to create a healthy culture. So I've certainly come across many leaders who I think are some leaders, who I think are really good at leadership. They really stand out. And they're the ones that are usually most proactive in dealing with issues so that things stay healthy. And it's the ones maybe struggle more to have those difficult conversations where the culture starts to unravel and can get quite unhealthy and even toxic sometimes.
What do you think is the key thing that makes a culture unravel, and what is the toxic behaviour that you see most prevalent?
Yeah, look, I guess the things I see often is where I think that where there's an us and them culture, so it gets very much management versus staff. There's also a culture where people do not feel comfortable or safe to have those difficult conversations. And I know you've done some work on psych safety, and I've done a little bit of looked through Amy Edmondson's work, who's done a lot on that as well. And I think if people don't feel safe, then they're not going to be able to go and address concerns with one another, and that's when it starts to get unhealthy.
That's right.
Issues aren't dealt with.
And then when there are triangles, because if someone wants to be authentic and express an opinion,
yes,
they may find that it's being talked about by a third party. So suddenly you've got this triangle happening where it's not confidential. It's being discussed by others, and then it becomes gossip.
Yep, that's right. And often in my team culture sessions, it's like we do above and below the line behavior, so we're very clear on what's okay and what's not. But it's also about how do you have those conversations, and how do you know when something is like a debriefing. That's where I think teams need to have a model in how to have those difficult conversations, where it is. The one I use is based on a Harvard model, and it's very helpful because it's going in open and curious for starters. It's
open and curious. Ask questions to understand before you start expressing your opinion, your judgment.
Exactly. And the purpose initially is to understand each other before we start looking at solutions. So it's going in very open, curious, trying to understand the other, them understanding you, and then we find a way forward. And I think if everyone has a model like that, it makes it easier.
So what would be a good, safe question to ask that doesn't put the person being asked on the defensive? Language style. Yeah.
Oh, definitely. So one of the things we look at, so I run a training on difficult conversations. It's the most popular training I have now. But one part we look at is how do you start the difficult conversation?
That's it. How to start.
How to start it. And the funny thing is, it's exactly like how you'd start as a mediator. So a mediator, when parties talk about issues, they often talk about them in a negative way. And what you need to do as a mediator when you're identifying the key issues from both perspectives is put them on the board or on the page on Zoom in a neutral way. So it's no longer said in a negative. So if someone says, I feel disrespected, I would write up respect.
Right.
And so if I was going to go and have a chat to you or say, being late for meetings all the time, I would write up meeting times.
Right.
And so when I approach, so if I was to approach you, Nina, I'd say, oh, Nina, if you've got a few moments, I'm just wondering if we could have a chat about meeting times and just see if we're on the same page on that.
Wow. See, it's neutral. It's getting rid of negative triggers and red flag words. Yes.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
One of the pieces of advice I read in a Harvard Business Review series was starting a question with what is the reason, not why. And the example I can remember is a manager asked the payroll person, why did you allow Mary to have a week's holiday? Instead of, what was the reason Mary was granted a week's holiday? She was just curious. She wasn't accusing. But the payroll person, because it was why, it's like, well, I had permission. You weren't here and I had the right to do it. And no, I just wanted to know why she needed it, because it was a week that we were down on some staff. I just wanted to know, was it important? Or whatever. So it's that little difference between why and what was the reason, and which is curiosity versus please explain.
Yes, exactly. And it's a trap that most people fall into. I see it as a trap in difficult conversations. They start in a way that provokes the other person and puts them on the back foot, and you get defensiveness. So it's being mindful about how you start it, but also your tone and how that comes across, and your body language. All those sort of things play a part in whether that conversation is going to go well or not.
Yes. I've come across an assertive assertiveness template that was had the acronyms BFIR: behavior, feeling, impact, results. In other words, when you come late for meetings, I feel frustrated. I feel like we waste time because then everybody has to repeat what was said. And what I'd like to see in future is you coming a bit early so we can all start together on time. What do you think of that template, or is it a bit too simplistic?
I think I'm not totally comfortable with it. I think it's still a little bit one-sided. It's not saying, "Hey, Nina, if you've got a few moments, I just want to talk about meeting times," and I just want to get just some clarity on what time you're thinking we start, or how you're finding the meetings going.
Right.
And just get a little bit of input from them first. And they go, "Oh, yeah, no, I'm all good with meetings." And then I'd say, "Look, I'm not sure if you're aware, but when you're not coming at 9, what that means is that we often delay the meetings and we're waiting for you to attend, and that then impacts our ability to get through all the agenda." And I wasn't sure you're aware of that.
Oh, isn't that nice? It's like tickling with a feather. Whereas I had a sledgehammer.
And look, I think we can be flexible, because I think some people need a sledgehammer. And those that don't get subtlety need a sledgehammer. But most people we can be a bit more subtle with. I still want to be clear on what my issue is or what my concern is. It's just not coming in with assumptions or judgments particularly in that opening statement.
You're almost coming across as that character in that old TV show, Columbo, where he sort of skirted around the issue and sort of, "Oh, by the way." And it's so soft. It's really admirable, Scott. I really like it. Thank you.
Yeah, look, it's finding that balance. Another little thing I learned at Harvard, I went there a few years ago, did a negotiation and leadership course. There's this great little graph that I really like, and you can bring it into a difficult conversation, you can bring it into conflict situations, where you have empathy on one axis. So you want to be empathetic and try to understand the other person's needs and their concerns and how they see things. And on the other axis is assertiveness.
Right.
So it's about my needs and my concerns and my perspective, giving equal validity to both. And so if you bring that mindset in, it's not all about them and it's not all about you. It's giving that, the equalness to both.
Yes, interesting. What's the one thing that managers could be doing that they're not doing now that would improve their conversations with and giving feedback?
Look, I think the first thing is a lot of managers get into their roles and they have a lot of skills, but they don't have skills in every area, which is, normal.
Yes,
They've obviously been identified with some skills as a leader or a manager, but they don't always, and it's the same with conflict, they're not trained in how to deal with conflict. So if they're not trained in it, they're not sure how to do it. I just had actually a president of a non-profit board ring me up just this morning and say, "Look, I've got this bullying situation and I'm really not sure how to deal with it. We need to do something. We've done a sort of an initial investigation. Can I get some advice?" And I was happy to just spend 20 minutes on the phone just talking through what I think would be the appropriate way to go, because you're not trained in how to deal with those sort of situations. And so managers then either put them off or try to sort of bumble through it and can potentially make it worse.
Yes, and it's a conscious intention to want to improve how you give feedback and how you deal with conflict, depending on the degree of it. Isn't that right?
Yes, that's right. And it's being able to be proactive. So if you understand a model in how to deal with it, whether it be a difficult conversation or a conflict situation between staff, if you have a model, you're going to be more confident knowing how to deal with it and will be more likely to deal with it quicker rather than let it sort of fester. And then that's when it can get unhealthy and impact other team members as well. That ability to be proactive, and that's what I see those leaders I mentioned earlier who I feel are really great leaders, is because they're open, they're honest, they're transparent. They'll have those difficult conversations and they'll still be very supportive of staff at the same time. And they'll have, a bit like Brene Brown, really clear boundaries. There'll be really clear boundaries in the workplace that people know what's okay and what's acceptable and what's not okay and not acceptable.
Because sometimes it's the little things that leaders really find difficult to even give feedback on, because they think, well, it's just a small thing. They might think I'm petty. But you see, the behaviour you accept is the behaviour you condone. And then it can actually go off track. So it's about fast feedback, isn't it right?
Yes, I agree. Fast, open, curious, still wanting to understand how they see it and then raising how you see it, and then just coming to that understanding and being clear with that as well. Found this little thing called calling it in or calling it out. I don't know if you've heard of that.
Well, I've heard the phrase calling it out, calling behaviour out, but I don't know about what the difference is calling it in.
Yeah, so that's what I liked. It was like a subtle difference. So calling it out is like you see something really inappropriate and you go, hey, hang on there, I'm really uncomfortable with that. You make it very clear, very firm. That's not okay because it's likely to do harm. Calling it in is more subtle. And what it is, I might see you sort of raise an eye at someone in the meeting or do something a little bit more subtle. And I might say, I'm just wondered in the meeting, I just saw you just make an interesting facial expression when Mary was talking. I'm just wondering what was going on for you there.
That's emotional intelligence, isn't it? To be people reading the subtle nonverbal cues that people give out. But it's so important, isn't it? Because you're doing it from a curiosity point of view.
Yes.
Because you're saying, does that indicate that you have an opinion that you're not expressing?
Yeah. Are you uncomfortable with what they said? Are you, what's going on there? I'm not coming in with judgment. I'm coming in with a soft curiosity and still saying, hey, what's going on there? I saw that.
Yes.
So they're not, Yeah,
no, you've used conflict intelligence in a way that suggests, IQ and EQ, emotional intelligence.
Yes.
Surely leaders have to, it's all self-leadership, the ability to improve their own self-leadership, their own self-awareness. What's one thing that a leader can do to ensure that they're improving their emotional intelligence?
What I see is probably the best leaders and the best teams are mindful. And what I mean by that, because it's obviously got lots of different definitions, is the ability to be present. That ability when you're with staff to be present with them and not, so obviously leaders often have a lot going on, but not to be multitasking or thinking and doing other things. But the other component is about being aware of their presence. It's noticing their impact on their staff. It's noticing what they say, how they say it, and even sometimes how much they say. Because sometimes the best leaders will shut up a bit and let others talk and give others space.
So that requires the leader to be aware that they don't really have to be the font of all knowledge, the decision maker. They can actually go to their people with questions rather than with answers.
Yes. And there's a little case study in that Amy Edmondson's safety book that I really like, and there's I think it's a fashion designer, might be Eileen Fisher, but don't quote me on that. But she says she's a don't knower. She's very clear that there's a lot of information she does not know, and what she said is that empowers people to be able to step up and invite people for their thoughts and opinions as well.
Right. So they might phrase the question, I don't know the best way to resolve this problem. What thoughts do you have? Like being willing to say that. I'm wondering what might be some solutions to this, and there's probably more than one solution.
Yes, exactly. And it's that psych safety concept of being honest about what you don't know, being transparent that you don't know all everything as a leader.
Which is the absolute opposite of what's called the Dunning-Kruger effect, where the more you are quite pompous about what you know and you probably know the least. There are these characters that they know everything, but actually they're not doing any research or enough exploration to actually be a know-it-all. Is there any book that a middle manager, a senior leader can read that will actually help them in all the things we've been talking about?
I don't read a lot of books, but I do run a lot of training, and I know they're very helpful. But that's being biased. But I do really think, whether they come to mine or someone else's, it's just getting that skilling up in how to do these really very tricky things. I don't think it comes naturally to many people to be able to deal with conflict really effectively and confidently, and the same as difficult conversations. I don't think it comes naturally to many people. So most leaders, most managers need to be trained in how to do it. But once they've got that, then, they can go and really, smash it out, I reckon.
Exactly. So an evolving manager is a learning manager, and they can't continue to evolve if they're only working with the input that they've got up till now. It's like it's always getting fresh input. Yes,
exactly.
Because there's definitely new trends in team culture, because I do know that the reason I had such poor managers is it was not the trend to even think about culture 2 decades ago. It's definitely come of age in the last decade or two. Yeah.
Yeah. But look, I get a couple of books I think are worthwhile. Is that Amy Edmondson, Psychological Safety, Fearless Organization, I think it's called, and the Difficult Conversations from Harvard, under the Harvard Negotiation Project. So they're two great books that are very helpful. All
right. So this podcast goes all over the world. So can people in other time zones connect with you online? Do you ever do online training? A lot.
Yeah. They can come. They'll just have to get up early.
Exactly.
No, we can be flexible. But they can connect if I can assist in any way. I've done stuff all over the world, so happy to assist in any way.
Yeah, and of course, your contact details will be in the show notes. Thank you so much, Scott. You've got a very busy schedule, and you're actually on site today, away from home, getting ready for training. So, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Nina. It was lovely chatting.
This episode, we've been speaking with Scott Dutton on the Manage Self Lead Others podcast for experienced and emerging people managers. I'm your host, Nina Sunday, and we interview experts who share insights on how to elevate and transform team culture. Until next time, see you then.
This podcast is a part of the C-Suite Radio Network. For more top business podcasts, visit c-suiteradio.com.